I'm joined now by France 24's correspondent Gulliver Cragg, who's in Kyiv in Ukraine. Gulliver, how are Ukrainians reacting to these pictures of Vladimir Putin watching those training exercises?
Well, generally, the Ukrainian leadership is clear that these nuclear threats coming from Russia shouldn't be taken lightly, and there have been repeated calls from Vladimir Zelensky, the president in particular, to get the West to make sort of clearer threats about how they would respond if Russia were to use a nuclear weapon against Ukraine. There are, on the other hand, voices also in Ukraine, such as Oleksiy Reznikov, the Defence Minister, who says that he's satisfied with assurances from his Western counterparts that they have privately very clearly told the Russians what they would do and what serious consequences would entail were Russia to use a nuclear weapon, and that there's perhaps no need to go public with it. There are sort of two prongs at the moment to Russia's nuclear saber rattling. One is the continued repetition and demonstrative things like these exercises of the fact that they've got nuclear weapons and that they reserve the right to use them if they're under threat. And the second are these assertions from Russia's Defence Minister Serhiy Shoigu that Ukraine could be trying to build a dirty bomb, which is not exactly a nuclear weapon, but a bomb that explodes with radioactive material in it, spreading it around in a wide radius, which can be very deadly. The Ukrainians think that the Russians are talking about Ukraine planning to use this because they are trying to mount some kind of false flag operation, and therefore accuse the Ukrainians of using some kind of nuclear weapon first. Oleksiy Reznikov again today said that he couldn't be sure the Russians weren't doing that, and they were now checking to see whether the Russians had taken any radioactive material from Chernobyl when they occupied Chernobyl earlier on in this invasion, in order to then say that they've got Ukrainian-made radioactive material and lend some kind of credibility to the idea that this was a Ukrainian dirty bomb. But Oleksiy Reznikov did go on to say that what he sees the Russians really doing is trying to scare Ukraine's Western partners as much as possible, trying to talk them into reducing their support for Ukraine, maybe trying to push Kyiv into negotiations with Vladimir Putin that Volodymyr Zelensky has made absolutely clear are no longer possible ever since Russia annexed these 4 Ukrainian provinces at the very end of September.
Meanwhile, Gulliver, aside from what people are saying and who is trying to scare whom, how would you describe the situation on the ground in Kherson at the moment?
Well, you know, the Ukrainians are keeping pretty tight-lipped about how their advance in Kherson is going and when they might expect to reach the capital city of that region, Kherson City. But today, Oleksiy Reznikov did admit that things are advancing slowly. He said that's because of the terrain. Firstly, the weather conditions are absolutely not propitious to advancing rapidly. He said they basically can't use wheeled armoured personnel carriers at the moment because it's simply too muddy, so they can only use tracked vehicles. And also, there are so many irrigation canals in this flat agricultural land that makes up most of Kherson region that the Russians have, as it were, got ready-made trenches for them. So the Ukrainians will beat them back by 500 metres or so, but they've already got trenches to retrench themselves into these new defensive positions.